Close.
Okay. Open this public forum. Topic, zone option discussion for Millard Road property. I'm going to turn it over to our city planner, Jacob Gretchen.
Thank you, Mayor Scholl.
Yes.
So this is a public forum. This isn't to make any formal decisions, but hopefully provide some directions on our approach to formal zone changes and stuff like that. So why have a public forum on this? Well, there's several different reasons. One, for any of you who've been around a while, the hospital project was a controversial one, and though the hornet's nest has calmed down in the last few years, I certainly remember that it was something else when it was happening. And so there's a lot of passion and emotion over that. Two, it's been in the hands of both the county and the city, and so there's a lot of politics involved, and so that's another good reason to kind of get some input. Three, there's some potential change in the city's long-range plans in both its comprehensive plan, parks plan, and transportation plan. And finally, we really need some focus before we formally start the process. So the first slide, that's the second one. The first one just shows generally where we're talking about. See the red arrow just on the north side of Millard Road there. So looking closer, we go to slide 2. This is an approximate 23.16 acre parcel. It's vacant, except for a little bit of flat work from the hospital project on the Millard Road side. That aerial photo predates that project. And a small pedestrian bridge over McDulty Creek on the north side. It's surrounded by residential uses, as you can kind of see in the aerial photo, and then a church here and there. So that's the character of the property in the area in a general sense. Something I want to note are some streets. Of course, you have Millard Road abutting the south side. You have Maple Street abutting the north side. And then another street of note while we're on this particular slide is Chase Road, which doesn't abut the property, but it's close there just to the west.
And it has an easement for that.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up, because
Yes.
we'll talk about that here on the next slide. Slide 3. So the reason, so this is from the annexation back in 2009. And the reason I think this is good to be aware of is when we talk about the hospital property, it's only the southern third of the entire piece. The hospital property was never this entire property. It's only about 8 some acres. And you know, I feel like maybe some of that fact has been lost over time. So just be aware of that. And then, as Mayor Scholl had mentioned, there's this utility and access easement, which was from 2009. And that was across 2 properties between Chase Road and the subject property. And I kind of drew it in there. You see the yellow highlight. That's where it connects to the property. And there's a provision that the grantors can terminate the private access, but not the utility easement, after 11 years of no development of the city property, which is March of 2020. So that's coming up. And then upon development, the grantors are supposed to dedicate that private access to the public, and included a small easement, a 10-foot strip on the west side of this property, so kind of close to that yellow there. And my assumption is this was a way for the city to access its property, assuming that the health district would have, maintained ownership, and the hospital would actually be built. Because I believe the city had plans to put a park there. Of course, for a variety of reasons, we ended up with it all, which kind of changes things a little bit. But that easement could be of use for development, or it couldn't. Being aware of it is part of the puzzle. So the next slide the city's 1997 Transportation Systems Plan. What I want to point out on here is this connection right there. I'll just go up here to show it to you. So this connection right here. So that is a street that does not exist in physical form. But is a planned street in our plan. So usually when we have a development subdivision, something like that, and we have a street that's planned, we try to make that happen. So this is 1997, about 12 years before the hospital property. Now the next slide brings us to our current transportation systems plan from 2011, and that collector street connection still exists. Now, this is kind of an awkward situation. I remember I asked my predecessor, well, why isn't the project considering the road? His response to me was, they don't want it. Okay? So we kind of have this weird circumstance to deal with. And so what do we do? The hospital project, they put in a curb approach instead of a street intersection. Of course, that could be rebuilt. It would be a 60-foot wide swath of right-of-way for a collector street. And given the whole length of that property, that would be about 3 acres, and it's already pretty encumbered with wetlands and stuff, as we'll see. And so what does that do to the usability of the property? It does need to cross the creek. Do we dedicate it while it's still in our ownership? Do we require the street to be built with the development or make it a condition of land sale? Or do we kind of, we know we need something, so maybe the compromise is to just at least require a multi-use path. So maybe it's not something usable by motorists, but at least for other modes of transportation, bicycles, on foot, it is a connection, a north-south connection there, which, according to our plans, is needed. So that's one of the little riddles we have to deal with on that one. So the next slide, sensitive lands. So I have a few things going on here. Starting from the north and working our way south, we have McNulty Creek. McNulty Creek is a significant stream to the city, and so it includes a 15-foot upland protection buffer from wherever the riparian area was delineated. I don't believe it's been delineated at this point.
Is that why it's so big right now? Is that the 15-foot?
Well, what it's showing there is the floodplain, the 100-year floodplain.
Oh, okay, because you can almost jump across it.
Yeah, so the riparian area and the floodplain are going to be two different animals.
Okay, that's what question.
But there's an important thing to be aware of with the floodplain rules, and this originates from lawsuits in the Puget Sound area. But what the federal government is eventually going to make us do is consider Endangered Species Act with regards to floodplain development. And when we have a fish-bearing stream like this, that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Yep. So whereas for decades, the floodplain rules have strictly dealt with minimizing damage from an insurance standpoint, this Endangered Species Act stuff will come into play. And it will kind of act like our protection zones in some regard, although that stuff's still being fettered out by the feds, which no surprise they're behind on. The next sensitive land is wetland MC18 you see there. This is not significant to the city, and so our rules wouldn't regulate it, but of course it's there, so something to be aware of. The next one, the largest one there, MC17, this is a past mitigation area for the school district. The school district owned it for a long time. It's also significant to the city, so it includes an upland protection area. And because it's a mitigation area from a past wetland, it's going to be difficult working with DSL to change it. I don't know if it's impossible, but the ratio to impact a mitigation wetland, I think it's 3-1 or something. Don't take my word for it, but the bar is higher as far as the Oregon Division of State
So we're
Lands
talking
is
about
concerned.
the bigger one there.
Yep.
Yep.
And then MC15, the one down by the Millard Road. This is also a mitigation area for the school district. Something not shown on this map is the hospital project had an additional mitigation area on the east side. So kind of where it's concave a little bit, that's filled in more or less. And something that's a little frustrating is as part of DSL's permitting for that, there was a deed restriction requirement that the health district didn't do. The county wouldn't do it while it was in their hands because they said it would eventually be in the city, and it's still not done. So that's some baggage that we probably want to have cleared up. I talked to DSL about it a couple years ago, and I have some of the stuff. It's just one of those busy work things that it's not our fault, but we get to deal with. So there are wetlands on there, and a couple of them will be challenging to impact because of their previous category as mitigation wetlands. So sensitive lands. So the next thing we can look at is our parks plan. And the next slide is a excerpt from our parks plan from 2014. May have been adopted in 15, I can't remember, but it's not that old. And there's a policy in our comprehensive plan that says the city is to acquire sites for future parks as identified on the comprehensive plan map as far in advance as possible, so that way you have them, and have those sites be within 1/2 mile of residential areas. So what this map shows are 1/2 mile buffers around parks to kind of show where the voids are. And so if you didn't have a park in that part of town, you would have a considerable void. And just before I forget, we did get a letter today from the county, signed by all the county
Can
commissioners.
you read that, Jacob,
Sure. Yeah. Let me.
when you get a chance?
Yeah. Let me do that as the last part.
Okay.
So the parks plan is something to consider, and the zone change, as we'll see, doesn't impact the ability to put a park in there. But there's a question. If the concept is to not have a park at all on that property, to make it efficient for staff, in conjunction with any zone change, we would probably want to change the comprehensive plan, the parks plan, which is an addendum to the comprehensive plan, to pick a different property in that area. I know in some of the casual conversations with the counselors, the property the city owns along Ross Road is a consideration. But that's just one of the elements that we have to consider.
Which would not put that blue circle very far out, right?
No, I would move it to the west a little bit.
Yeah, it's literally about, as crow fly, a mile away. Yeah, not even. Yeah.
So, of course, that would require conversations with the Parks Commission. The other thing, though, to consider is public access to the creek. There's a lot of public access to the creek on the east side of town, especially with the city's acquisition of the mill property, assuming it's opened up for public access. But there's not a lot on the other side. That's okay. It's a creek.
Jacob does a little buffer city owned on the other side of the creek. Does that, how big does it technically have to be for a park? I guess, I was thinking that walking trail that comes across the footbridge, and then we have, it's wooded on the other
It doesn't
side.
have to be massive.
Just curious, that's all. 'Cause I know that trail's utilized by the cross-country kids, and would definitely like to.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to vet with the Parks Commission.
Yeah.
I think that really the answer is it big enough to be enjoyed by the public at large for the intended use? Obviously, you're not going to get a soccer field there, but as a small nature park, it could function. And some people just like to stare at the water and listen to it trickle. It's comforting, especially when you do public hearings like these all the time.
I was thinking that.
So next, let's look at our comprehensive plan. This goes back to 1978, so we're going back 40 years, and this is the city's first modern comprehensive plan. And the reason I put this as a slide is you'll see this property, the portion of it, which is the great majority, just on the south side of the creek, is designated as public lands. So this has been assumed to be public lands for several decades, which is actually can help a little bit. So the next slide is a focus on current zoning. So you see it's blue. That shows that it's public lands. The portion north of the creek, you see the yellow there, is R7. And so on this slide, if it's a solid color, it's in city limits. And if it's the hatching, it's unincorporated urban growth area. And so you see this as kind of the peninsula of city limits, if you will. But, you know, sometimes it's coincidental that some of the same information on various public hearings in the same night applies. And it kind of does in this case, too, because the surrounding comprehensive plan designation is rural, suburban, unincorporated residential, which is the same comprehensive plan designation of the Zoll property. And that kind of drives the conversation in part about, well, what do we zone this thing? I did throw on some utilities. We have a sewer line from the south side. And so city sewer is available. And then city water is available from the north. You'll see a little blue line there. I put a box to point that out. And I know McNulty has some infrastructure around there too. We'd have to check with our agreement to make sure, you know, we're getting along with servicing. But city utilities are there to serve development as we can. So, what the heck are we going to zone this thing? And this brings us to our last slide. And Kathy, could you zoom in? The main thing on this is the little table at the top. Yeah, perfect. So there's a variety of options that we can have. But as we talked about in the Zoll case, the first thing we need to think about is the comprehensive plan, because that's what determines the zoning. And the easy decision is to designate it as all the surrounding properties, which would be suburban residential. That allows R7 or R10. And, you know, it's hard to argue compatibility and, you know, that it won't gel with the surrounding area. So all the other options, well, so designated suburban residential, and then your zoning options would be R7 or R10. Really, if you were going to go that route, R7 would make the more sense because you get more bang for your buck, especially given all the encumbrances with sensitive lands and stuff like that. So the other options that I talk about are different. They're what I'm terming alien comprehensive plan designations, because they're different than anything around it. But the advantage of this having really an alien comprehensive plan designation for 40 years kind of lets us look at different options, because it's always been different. And it's always assumed to be different. Obviously, a hospital would be very different, and you couldn't do it anywhere else in the immediate vicinity. The one thing I should say, though, is although parks, you'll see public parks, and all these options are either permitted or conditionally permitted, which is the C with the yellow. The X means you just can't do it. It's a best practice to have a park designated as public lands because it just emphasizes the fact that, yeah, we really see this as being the public, and we want to preserve that public use, though it's not forced. So some of the other options. We could go with the comprehensive plan of general residential, which would allow for R5, which we've heard a lot about tonight, or apartment residential. That would give a more efficient use of the land, especially given all the obstacles that I had mentioned. It would provide more flexibility for use types, which is highlighted here. And it is the best option for lower income options. A third option to consider is designating it as general commercial. That allows a lot of different types of zones, but the ones that I focused on are mixed use and general commercial. Some of the things to think about there are tax base. We know that residential is not good for tax base. It sucks the coffers. It does not add to them. And so it would be a benefit for that. But some residential uses are still possible. The mixed use zone allows a full cadre of residential uses. General commercial is a little more limited. But you can get apartments and RV parks with general commercial. And the other benefit of mixed use is it's very flexible, lets the market decide. A fourth option to consider is designating it as light industrial. Heavy industrial isn't recommended. That would be a ridiculous recommendation. But light industrial maybe. It's the best for tax base. Although we may want to exclude some uses that would probably be a damn shame if they happen there, such as mini storage. So that's something to consider. And then the other options are a mix. But these are probably the zonings that you would want to explore if you were kind of thinking of all the potential options. And of course, we hope to have some public input on that as well. And I think that's what I have.
Just real quick, the maps, all the maps you showed that I could recognize were so close I couldn't see neighborhoods beyond the directly adjacent. Is it possible that we have a map that's like somewhere between the whole map and the tiny slice?
So you're talking like the Arbor development?
I
Or
just want to see it referenced to other things closer. Because that is all of St. Helens. And then the other is just the square. So I'd like to see something in between.
Probably it does. Well, the development patterns are pretty consistent on all sides, except to the north. Like in this map where you see the red, those are properties that are in city limits and have been developed to a lot size that's 5,000, 7,000 square feet, roughly. With some variety. Otherwise, it's kind of that inefficient county land division, which you can see on slide 2. You can see the property lines, as well as slide 6. And actually, on both of those, if you look at the very top, you can see just the southern part of that higher density development.
Okay.
Does that help?
I showed her on Google Earth.
Okay, cool. And we can always use ArcGIS or Google Earth as
Well, when
well.
you drive around it, it's hard to get it's a big piece of property to get a concept on. But
Sure. So I guess what we're hoping for as staff is and I know we've talked about this at the hearing, but I haven't really had a chance to say, okay, here's all the things we have to consider. And we don't want to apply for a zone change that says, well, we're going to go with one of these 6 zoning districts or 7 and let the public process decide. We really kind of want to hopefully narrow it down.
well, I was hoping you would read, and I know you said you would.
Oh, yeah.
The letter from the county
Yeah.
commissioners, because we did reach out to the county commissioners. This is something that we've been discussing, not just them, but other.
Yeah, thank you for reminding
Yes,
me.
yes.
And this is something in general terms that we've been discussing ever since we ended up with the hospital property. It's not new, but it's nice to have support from the county commissioners.
So, and I have the original fresh ink letter here. So I'm not going to read it word for word, but just some of the highlights that I see. We believe the property would be best served by being rezoned as multi-use. The most closely associated zoning would be the mixed-use zone, which is MU up there. So we believe a mix of residential, both low income and moderate income, along with senior housing, apartments, commercial would best serve the community. I should note that the mixed-use zone for apartments allows the apartment residential density, and for single-family dwellings is the R5 density. So it does drive that higher density, which can accommodate greater housing mix as far as affordability is concerned.
Absolutely.
They also talk about a cottage cluster model.
Do you know of any cottage clusters close by?
Portland.
Scappoose doesn't have one.
Yeah, Scappoose has rules for them,
Yeah, they don't have
and
one.
I'm not sure if they've had any applied. We haven't adopted any rules for that.
I would like to adopt rules for that. I know you're surprised.
Yes, we've talked about that.
It's coming.
And we have a lot of literature on it. It's just a matter of having the time to synthesize it and figure out what best is for St. Helens. The board would like to see the piece carved out and so this is another part, reserved for a piece carved out and reserved for a park.
Yep.
So there's a park component they think is appropriate. And then they also mention meaningful transit, including bus pullouts and shelters, and vibrant pedestrian bicycle flow.
Yep.
So those are the highlights. So I don't know how you want to structure this, if you want to start with questions or if you want to get some public input first. It's not a public hearing, so we're not, this is how it exactly should work. It's a public forum, so it's a little more fluid.
Yeah.
It just depends how you want to operate the sails on the ship.
So I know there are some people that raised their hands. And would you like to step up to the mic and give some public input on this? So the commissioners also talk about, and this isn't really formal, so you can come on up, but I still need you to state your name, but they're talking about a mixed use would best serve the community because we could actually have so much more flexibility of making low income and possibly senior housing, and it would also even allow a little bit of commercial in the area, but they also emphasize the park, like Jacob said, so go ahead.
My name's Larry Karnowski, and I live at 35167 on your map, right next to this. I went through all the hospital fiasco. I vote for R10. I'm out there in the rural, in the country, for that feeling. I don't need R5 or hotels or whatever next to me. I don't need row houses. That's not what's in the area. And if you people take into account our way of life out there, our quality of life, then you will veer towards R10. If you're just going to zone this for marketability to make more money for the city, then I'm just wasting my time here. And all my other neighbors I've talked to feel the same way.
So
We could all live in town, but we don't.
Is yours the newer house there that was built right next to the hospital property?
Pardon me?
Yes.
Is yours the newer house there on I think it's 3/4 acre that's right next to the hospital
Yes.
property? Okay,
There.
thank you.
So we're keeping everything an open mind on this whole deal. We know this was a taxing district, and we got it plopped on us, but it wasn't free by any means either. We had legal fees, even though it was in the headlines. It read given to the city of St. Helens. It wasn't. There was a lot of legal stuff that had to happen in order to get this. But it is a taxing district that paid. We're trying to do make the best use of this to serve the community. And we'll take that completely into consideration. But that's why we're having this forum. Okay?
That's another thorn in my side is
Like you and a lot of other people.
a big taxing district paid for that fiasco, but now only the citizens of the city of St. Helens have any say in it or will reap any benefit of it.
That's because of state statute.
I know.
Yeah.
Laws are
We didn't-
legal, they're not
We didn't
moral.
ask for it.
By rights,
You don't, Larry, you don't have to live in the city limits to come up here and testify. So you do have a say in it.
Well, like I say, that's where I'm at,
Yeah.
I liked it better before they started the hospital project. We can't go back. But I would like to see the city, do what's conducive with the rest of the property around there. And no row houses, please. And my other question would be, there is a new sewer line there, but how, that sewer line wasn't that big. I watched it, went right through the front of my house.
Yeah.
That sewer line
It's amazing.
wasn't built for a big housing development.
It's amazing how much a 6 or 8 inch line though can push, right? It really is. Is it 10? Okay. So, yeah, come on up.
Keep taking comments.
I'm Betsy Penzel. I have lived within 2 miles of this area 50 years. I was lucky enough to have my backyard as the creek. I would love it if more kids could enjoy that creek because most of it is abutted up next to private property. So I would love to see at least part of that saved as parkland. I would love if the whole thing was left as parkland, walking paths. We don't have sidewalks out there, so I walk those streets. It's really, really busy. Ross Road is crazy because everyone comes from Arbor through Ross to hit Millard and go to the highway. So to put a park there, you really have to consider this tiny little 2-lane road with no shoulder. I mean, I'm in the ditch half the time when I'm walking. So I would just like, I mean, if you are going to build on it, R10, because that's what fits in with that area right now. We have other areas where you can build apartments and other
I know.
kinds of housing, and I think that's, I mean, you look at my demographic, we're looking for single-level houses without stairs.
We
and,
could
you know.
provide those.
Huh?
We could provide those.
But anyway, that's just like if I had my dream, that's what it would be.
Thank you.
Just a question for people. They mentioned the little cottage clusters. What about the wetland area out front? If you have little 800 square foot homes for seniors only, a 2-bedroom, they could maybe possibly. I'm just throwing this out there. This is how I think, randomly, a lot. But they have their grandkids stay over. They have that extra room for that. But they don't. Most seniors don't need
the
an
yard.
expensive home or a big yard. So.
One thing that I didn't bring up that would be a good way to go, I would think, is like an assisted living. I watched all the construction out there. All the roads are roughed in. It's just not weeds growing there. There's actual road beds under there. The parking lot is roughed in. The building pad is basically roughed in. Instead of a hospital, people could go and build an assisted living center there with a minimum amount of money. I mean, just start with the building. You don't have to start with anything but digging down and finding that stuff. So, and I don't have a problem with assisted living. I might need it pretty soon.
Hey, it won't be too far from your house, right? Brady, come on up.
So the property was in my name before the city stole it.
Name
So
for
I
the
just
record.
wanted to,
Gave it to
Brady Preheim, 195 Clark Street. So just to correct a couple of things, the city did want it. The reason that you had the legal fees is because you fought me for 4.5 years to steal it from the rest of the county. So the city did want it, so don't act like that you didn't. And the fact of the matter is that you ended up with it doesn't make me very happy Because as the other gentleman pointed out, most of that property, only about 37% of it was paid for by the city of St. Helens, and the rest of it was paid for by the other taxing districts within the county. And the fact this is the statute does not say that it is supposed to go back to the city. That was the scam that the city and the county worked out
I
together.
read it.
Pardon?
I read it. It
I,
does-
I've read it too, as a matter of fact. I practically have it memorized. So, yes, I did read it. The statute is very clear in saying
Yes.
that it can be sold as any bankrupt company goes. And that's basically what happens. And it says at the end of the liquidation of the property, if the property has not been sold, then it has to go to the taxing district.
That's what
But that liquidation did not happen when the city was transferred. In fact, as a matter of fact, the county still meets as themselves as the taxing district for the hospital district. So it's still not liquidated to this day. So the fact that it went back to you was actually wrong. But at any rate, we're moving forward, and I'm just correcting the record that was incorrectly stated. The fact is, the matter is that to me, to have the property be used for a item that would produce property, and again, it is a small portion of that. It's but there's already been $1.8 million worth of infrastructure put into that property, both with the curves, the sidewalks. There is a wetland mitigation system with a pumping system. There's electricity and
You watched this really close. If I recall, was there some asphalt laid and then actually chewed back up?
yes,
Okay, that's what I thought.
yeah, and so there was a lot of money spent on that property, and then of course never used. But my biggest concern would be that if it's going to be used, I think it needs to be used for something that will benefit not just the city, not just go into your general fund, but a use that the county could use. And I would support low-income housing if you didn't sell the property and try and make money off of it. But if you donated the property, I don't care what you do with this property that was yours before the hospital, frankly, that's up to you. But the property that belonged to the health hospital district should be donated or used for some, I know the food bank just bought property, but they were interested in it at one point, something that would benefit the county, be it low-income housing or be it a park, even something like that, that would not be a profit-making. And that's what I would object to, that you would get property and then turn around and make money off of it.
Some of the conversations that we've had were with CAT. We were talking about potential partnerships with them.
I would be supportive of a partnership with CAT to build low-income housing or multi-unit housing for them. That I would be supportive of that.
So what zoning are you pushing then?
I guess that would be R10. I mean, it's R5, right?
The mixed
use.
Yep.
Mixed use would be.
Yep.
Yeah, and that would be fine with me, I guess, if that was your
And of
purpose.
course, this is just a forum. This is long ways out. There'll
Yeah,
be
we're just
something.
talking.
There'll be a
More conversation.
lot more conversation around this.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure now that we put this forum out and the word gets out, there'll be some eyes on it, and that's what we wanted, because there's an easement that's coming up too that needs to be addressed, maybe for possibly ingress and egress too. So
Okay.
I don't know how it falls into play, but I know it's a big deal. So okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate everybody waiting.
Yes.
for the other hearing.
Howard, do you have something to say on the property? Come state your name. We know you, but you still have to state your name for the record.
Howard Blumenthal. I'd just like to say that I'd like to see that property be used for the public's benefit and stuff, considering how much money the taxing district did take from our wallets and how weird it all came out. But I really think that the use of parks, some type of senior something or other, something that would benefit the community and not necessarily make somebody a bunch of money with housing. So I'll keep it short.
Thank you. Okay, so
More
our
input, more input.
oh, here comes Sean. Okay. state your name, please.
Shauna Straub Harrison. I'll make it quick. I know everybody's tired. So I also support R10. And the reason why I support R10 is because this area is mainly Warren, which is more of a rural setting. And I mean, it was that many years ago, it was delineated that you thought it would be a park. One thing I had a question about, both parcels, are they both zoned the exact same? So the one in front of Millard and the two lots, they both are zoned the exact?
Everything's zoned the same except the small portion north of the creek. So you see that little yellow portion?
Right. And so you don't own the property down below if you scan?
We currently own everything highlighted in the bold black. So everything between Maple and Millard.
Right. So you scroll down a little bit, and there to the left, that R7 that's not zoned by.
No, that's a church.
That's the church.
Yeah.
Okay. So also McNulty Creek. I don't know if you guys realize or know, but last year it was the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife reclassified it to a salmon steelhead bull trout creek. So I just don't know if you guys have taken any of that into consideration in regards to any of your development plans per se. So just something like, I know this is just kind of an open forum, so something to think about.
Which creek?
Nick Nolte. Last July, they anybody who lived within the vicinity of McNulty Creek received documentation, received mailed letters from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife about the reclassification of the salmon steelhead and bull trout creek, which is also something to consider because you guys have been doing with some of your developments, part of their storm drain plans have been to dump into McNulty Creek. So, and then the parks. We really need parks. So I'm real pro park on it and trying to maybe make it a nice park where it incorporates the wetland. And, you know, even at R10, will you scan back down to that, to the R10 to your, which I really appreciate that. That's a great graph. The very last page, like you said, the one that has all the different zoning options and what you guys think. Keep going. Yep, there you go. Perfect. Sweet. So R10, I mean, if you look on there, what you can and can't do, you basically are left with single-family detached units and public parks, which you still could develop that property in a like fashion that could be of use to some of our vulnerable sectors. I really like the idea of single-level properties for elder people. So if you were going to do some of it, because I know that, I mean, ultimately we're here to rezone this so you guys can do something to develop it to make some money. I mean, you have down below about your tax base, so that's, I get that. I get you need to, you know, it's all developing, you know. But I just hope you take into consideration the area when you guys develop it and all the developments that are already there. So I definitely agree with Brady to try to resource what we already got instead of going in there and tearing apart more concrete or la la la, la 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 la.
Thank you.
That's it.
Somebody else had their hand up.
Okay.
Linda Zoll, and I wanted to state that I don't live right there. That's not my neighborhood. I'm speaking as a member of our community, and it's wonderful that the city does own a piece of property, and it doesn't, you know, this is a great opportunity. And I like the idea about how the gentleman said, you know, that we should be using this for something for the public. You know, once you sell it and it becomes a house, it's in someone else's hands. So what zoning I would recommend, I'd go along with what the county commissioners were saying, with the purpose of it being something that would benefit the public. I mean, we need a community center, we need a new pool, we need senior housing, we need disabled housing, we need...
The pool has its own district.
Yes, yes, I know. But just the concept that, you know, using it for something for the public, and I'm... No, not tonight. but yes, I really like that you guys are talking about this and about focusing on using it for the community. So thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Linda. Okay, one last chance for anybody. Okay, this public hearing is closed. So we're only 2 hours late. We have a couple officers to swear in, so I'm just going to get right on with this as soon as Kathy needs a minute just to, she has to close it out and restart it. So